Devon Partnership Productions presents When Worlds Collide. Well, it's actually what happened when two teams shared Crediton Hospital. This video describes the way that smart recovery may work from the team perspective. The first teams have started to co-locate, and this is their story. Now, we all know that most rooms are empty for most of the time. And for a lot of the working day, people are out and about seeing patients or attending meetings, and the space is unused. In most teams, the base is at its busiest first thing in the morning and at the end of the day. You can see pretty much every man and his dog, but in the time in between, it can often be very quiet. So at a time when the Trust is having to make some big decisions about the future, it has been agreed that rather than cutting staff numbers, we should make better use of the space that we have. This means more teams having to share a smaller space. But this does mean that we can sell off buildings that we don't need, or avoid having to pay rent to someone else. And from the business perspective, it makes sense. As the Smart Recovery project moves on, we'll be losing a lot of buildings, so almost every team in DPT will be affected in one way or another. But we must always remember that this project means that more money is going to be spent on treatment of patients rather than on buildings. However, this way of working can be quite a shift in approach for some teams, and this is a story of some of the pioneers. In Crediton, the MAR, PAR and OPMH teams are now sharing Crediton Hospital as a base. It was already being shared with the existing staff of the hospital and with DAS. This has meant the general adult staff moving from Hillbank into the OPMH team base. Some things have gone smoothly, but there have been some teething troubles that we can learn from for the future. Getting a space ready for a team to move into can be disruptive. There are room moves, you need to have the cables and IT installed, and there are quite detailed discussions about how the space will work and how it will be divided. For both teams in Crediton, this process has involved packing up and sorting out all the belongings and bits of clutter that have built up over the years. And that takes time. When I became the Smart Recovery clinical lead, I gave up my usual clinical office, and I know from personal experience just how long it can take to part with all of those little things that have made an office feel homely. Yeah, probably best not ask about those. And then to exchange all of that for a hot desk, which looks the same as all the others. Let's hear from Barry Lucas, the community team manager for the MAR team, about his experience.
There are natural anxieties about how two teams that have never had to work together will actually get along. It's hard for the team that move, but also for the team that have to share. We had a welcome do on the day after the move for all users of the resources at Crediton Hospital. Communicating well is important, and if we had our time again, we would have met more often before the move. I'd encourage teams that are getting ready to cohabit to do this. Being located together is actually a good thing. It's a great opportunity to have two teams working more closely together, out of their silos in a more collaborative way. It's actually worked out better than we expected. It's not been without its difficulties. It's important to recognise that both teams will feel a sense of loss. The team that move have lost their physical base, and the team that receive will find that their base no longer feels like home. This element of the move is very much still work in progress.
Inevitably, there are tensions that need to be resolved. Sometimes it can seem like members of the other teams have all got two heads. What do you do when two people want the same room at the same time? You don't get to have it just because you're older or because you're the consultant. And the answer to this has been a robust room booking system, with workers being professional about only booking out the times that they really need. There are all the other human tensions too. When you're hot desking, how does a messy worker and an obsessional worker get along? How do you keep the noise manageable? Who sees to the washing up? How do you tackle the person who leaves all their things on a hot desk all day so that other people can't use it while they're away? In this way, it's important that teams agree very clearly how they're going to use the space, and all manage things in the same way. And it can be a real challenge if some teams are further ahead in their thinking than others. In the longer term, there are questions about how teams will continue to function. In the new system, the working week will change. Team members may be spending whole days out at assessment clinics or treatment clinics. Team members will be using their psychological therapy or non-medical prescribing skills, and this will mean that the people who are normally about at the base won't be there. This time in clinic is going to be protected, so the rest of the team will need to help look after any urgent problems that come up for patients who usually see a worker who is now in a clinic. And this is a much more team approach to care than we currently are used to. This will mean that most teams will rely more on a duty system to pick up the urgent calls that can't wait. Another area where we will see changes is with staff support. At the minute, we usually rely on someone being back at base for an informal debrief after a difficult patient encounter. There's usually someone floating around who you can get some advice from. But that might not be practical in the new approach, as many more workers will be mobile. That means that they'll complete their visits away from the team base, perhaps never dropping in over the course of a working day. Other workers will be off in the clinic hubs, in quite a protected space providing assessment and treatment. This means that the systems will need to change, so that a worker who needs to immediately discuss a case has access to a senior colleague there and then, whether that's by phone, by video conferencing, or in person. This means that the structure of the working day will probably change for all staff, as will the structure of the working week. So the Smart Recovery project will mean major changes in the way that we all work, whether that's managers, clinicians, consultants or administrators. And a lot of the practicalities will need to be decided locally, with teams collaborating and sharing, working outside of the silos that we've all built up. The Smart Recovery approach is to make sure that we continue to spend more of our money on staff and on treating patients than we do on maintaining expensive and underused buildings.